Okay, let's talk about company culture. So, research into the value of company culture shows that it's positively associated with productivity and quality improvement, cost reduction and profitability, reduced turnover, and improves customer service. So, you got a lot of reasons to care about company culture, right? Productivity and quality improvement, again, should be kind of common sense. If you're happy at work, you're more likely to actually be productive and want to do the work and do well in terms of your quality, right? And if people are doing things correctly and they're working hard, that reduces costs, right? And it obviously then improves profitability if they're doing a good job. At turnover, the reason that, and again, this also relates to reduced cost and profitability. The reason that reduced turnover happens is, again, you're happy at work, so therefore people don't want to leave, right? It's one of the three things a job can offer you, and if you have that one, it's another tent pole to keep them there. Now, why does it help you reduce turnover if you're the manager, you're the leader, you own this company, right? Well, it's also pretty simple. If you don't have high turnover, that means I don't have to spend time rehiring and training new people, right? Constantly. Because when you have to rehire and train people, that costs you money. Because first of all, you got to spend the time finding people, doing the interviews, right? Rehiring them. Then you have to train them. Usually while they're being trained, they're less productive than they would be if they were a seasoned employee, right? It was used to everything. And so all that stuff just costs you money, right? So that's another reason to kind of care about the company culture if you're the one who owns the company, right? And then improve customer service. So this again just goes back to you're happy at work, you like the job, you're likely to be more friendly with the customers, right? Because you enjoy being there and you're just in a better mindset. So those are some of the like positive associations with it. Now, in terms of communication, how does communication affect culture, right? Now, obviously, policies, the nature of the work, obviously there are clear things that in terms of the nature of the job that communication isn't affecting. It's just part of the job that's going to affect if people are happy, if they work well together, right? There's a lot of these other dynamics involved. We will talk about some of those dynamics in a few minutes here. But in terms of communication, there's a couple of ways that communication directly influences the culture of specific organizations. So the first thing is basically just at a broad fundamental level is something called communicative climates. And this is basically the tone of an environment, right? So whether people feel like it's open, it's friendly, it's hostile, whatever it may be, as determined by how people communicate with each other. Okay? And one of the big reasons this matters, beyond the fact that it can be negative or positive and therefore have an impact, another big reason this matters is that once that tone gets set in a workplace setting, it's really hard to change it. Okay? It's really difficult to change it. So again, this could be everything from verbal to nonverbal. So to give you kind of an example is, let's say we're in a meeting, we're in a conference room, and I'm the leader or I'm the manager, and I ask people, so we could do A or B, what do you think we should do? And I kind of throw out there, I'm kind of leaning A. I think A would be would increase profitability or whatever it may be, right? And David starts talking, and David suggests B or some other option, and I roll my eyes, or I kind of cut him off. Or I'm like, well, that's going to take extra employees, and we can't hire new people right now. Anybody have any other ideas, right? So me rolling my eyes or cutting them off, other ideas, right? Kind of like being dismissive. Is that going to make David feel like I care very much or value what he had to say? Probably not, right? Or so if I just cut them off, right? Another example would be, you always hear managers say this, well, if you have any questions, feel free to come talk to me, right? I have an open door policy. And then their door is literally not open, right? You walk by their office, it's always shut, right? Do not disturb sign. That's a nonverbal thing, but like, think about this. If you're a manager or a leader, or if you're somebody who you want people to feel like they can come talk to you, if you just keep your office door open, literally open versus shut, that's sending a message, right? If you take suggestions, like what are ways to improve, right? You ask people, what do you think we could do? I want to hear from you, right? And people offer suggestions, but those suggestions are never acted upon, right? Are you going to think your opinion's valued? Right? Probably not. If you feel like they just never act like they care, about, they never respond to what you ask them to do, right? They never actually follow through with what you ask them to do. Like, you've probably experienced this in your personal life, right? Where if you are upset about something and you tell the person about it and they're like, okay, and they don't fix it, do you feel like they care about how you feel? Probably not, right? So it's things like that. So do you follow up on suggestions people make? Do you even ask them for their opinion, right? Is your door open or closed? These are like subtle communication things that you can do. Another example would be, let's say there's a problem. How do you address problems? And so an example that would be, let's say somebody's always late to class, or they're always late to a meeting. So let's say somebody is always late to a meeting, and like we have a meeting every morning and they're always late. And I'm the boss and I say they're late again, and then the meeting ends and the person's kind of makes the whole, sorry I wasn't here on time kind of thing. And I say something like, look, you got to be you got to be more committed. You got to be here. When these meetings start, and we delve out assignments at the beginning of these meetings. And when you're late, then I've got to figure out who else to give. I've got to adjust for that, because I don't know if you're going to, what's going on with you, and I got to assign the work somewhere, and it just makes things chaotic. Like, you got to be here. Or, I basically say something that's kind of like dismissive or negative, right? Like, work harder, do better, right? So let's say that I do that. That person, they're going to know they need to be there on time. If I chew them out, basically. But that's certainly not going to, they're going to know, like, yeah, they're going to need to be there on time, but that's certainly not going to make them want to talk to me or feel open communicating with me, because I kind of criticize them, right? Like, now what's another way you can handle that? I could say, well, let me talk to you right after the meeting. So then after the meeting, I could say, so look, when the meetings start, and the reason it's kind of important to be here on time is because at the beginning we delve out the assignments, who's going where, who's doing what, who's working with who's doing what. And when you're not here, I got to figure out if I need to like offload that work somewhere else. So is there, like, what's going on? Is there something going on at home? Is there a reason, that you're not able to get here right when the meeting starts? So in other words, I didn't just start out by communicating with them in a way that's like, the problem's your attitude. The problem's right there. It's you. Fix it. Right? That's not what I did. I was like, the problem is not necessarily you and you're lazy, or you need to, try harder, right? The problem is you're not here on time. Right? So is it something personal? Is there another reason beyond just saying, well, they're lazy or don't care, right? So it's how you approach it. Now, if I approach a problem that way, it's like, here's why it matters, right? Because we delve out the assignments. So what's going on? Is it something going on that's made? So in other words, I left it open. I didn't say the problem's you. It could be a lot of things. Could it still be their attitude? Sure. But it could be other things too that's going on, right? And so by being open like that, I at least came across much more approachable when there's a problem, right? And they're going to be more willing to open up to me. And you know what? If it is something with their commitment or their attitude, they might be more willing to just be honest and just say, yeah, I gotta be more committed to be here on time, right? Because I didn't just like jump down their throat. So in other words, I communicated with them in a way that was face saving, that wasn't just attacking them. So it's these little subtle things that you do. When people make suggestions, do you actually act on them to show them their opinion's value? Do you not cut them off in meetings, right? Things like this, or like I said, when you criticize somebody, you keep the problem in mind, and the goal is to fix the problem, not to just yell at them. And you approach them in a way that is not like attacking them. If you engage in these communication tactics, right, that's going to create a climate where people feel open to talk to you. They feel valued, like their opinion is valued and that they're respected. And that's going to set a positive climate in the workplace. Other direct messages that affect culture: confirming messages, disconfirming, and disagreeing messages. So you want to use a lot of confirming messages. So confirming messages are things like, basically anything that conveys value. Like, I see where you're coming from, I understand that, something like that. Or, oh, I see that you said we should do B, I see the benefit of that. So or just acknowledging people, right, for what they did that was good or positive. And again, this isn't just workplace. You can apply this in family environments, like really kind of anything. You can apply this to relationships, right? When people do things, it shows that they care about you. Do you acknowledge that? Do you actually tell them, I appreciate you? Like, you don't have to say it that corny, in such a corny way or whatever, but do you actually do it? Do you show them that you appreciate them and care, right? Endorsements is just sort of recommending, right, them or something like that. But Do you give messages that sort of affirm their value, right? Disconfirming messages are basically when you are communicating in a way that shows a lack of regard for them. So, like the example I gave of interrupting people or just irrelevant responses. Like, if you want the classic example of this would be like in an interpersonal setting. You're talking to your friend, and they're talking about like some traumatic thing that happened in their life, or just something really important to them, right? And so they're talking about something like that, and you listen to it for a few minutes, and then they're like, "So what do you think?" And then you just, you pull up from like playing with your phone. You're like, "Thinking pizza. What do you want for lunch?" Right? So you just give this like crazy irrelevant response. Talk about lunch, or show you're streaming, instead of actually like dealing with like, so you just give this insensitive response, right, or irrelevant response. It's kind of like things like that. So when somebody does that, do you think they're listening? Do you think they care about what you had to say? Of course not, right? And you might have already experienced things like that, right? So interrupting people, talking over them, rolling your eyes, like think of nonverbals, right? Things like that. Those types of responses. When it says disconfirming, what you want to think of it as basically like, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, do you communicate with people in a way that makes them feel less valued? Right? It's kind of like in interpersonal communication. When I teach that, we talk about like conflict styles. In fact, we're going to talk about that a little bit later here. But conflict styles in terms of like fighting, right? So if you fight with somebody and you're always yelling at them and talking over them and interrupting them and raising your voice, or being emotionally abusive or physically abusive, are you sending the message to them that they're valued, that you care about their value? Right? Probably not. And that's going to lead to problems, right? So it's kind of like that. So it's like, and again, even if you think of it in the not necessarily the extreme of like an abusive situation, but just like think about how do you fight just at the lower level of just like interrupting people, yelling at them when they're not yelling at you, when they complain about something and you don't do anything about it, right? You say yeah, and then you don't change. You got to ask yourself, like, there's a price to that, right? Eventually that chips away at the relationship, right? Because it makes them feel like they're not as valued and you don't care as much. So you got to think about those things. Disagreeing messages. Here's the deal with that. It's okay to disagree, right? And dissent can be a really good thing because in any situation, because it can make people sort of challenge and reassess perspectives. But what this is really talking about is disagreeing messages that are not helpful. They're not going to help in any way. So this is, for example, complaining or arguing about things, particularly in job environments, that you cannot change, right? So it's complaining about a task you were assigned, but you're not the manager, you're not the leader, you didn't set that up, and you have no way to change it. Is it really going to do anything or be any good or healthy to just complain about it, right? Or arguing in a situation where you can't change the outcome, right? Now, I will say, sometimes there is a value in, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, actually, in kind of like the relationship context. Sometimes there is a value in just sort of, you need a shoulder to cry on, or you need to get something off your chest, or you just need to vent, I guess is actually the best kind of example here, right? There is a value in that. I'm not saying there's not, right? Sometimes you just need to vent. And even though you can't change it, it's already happened, it's done. You just need to vent about it. So I'm not talking about that. That can be healthy and sometimes what needs to happen. But what I'm saying is once we've moved past that point, right, if you're still complaining, you've already kind of done the venting. Now it's just counterproductive, right? Now you're not actually doing anything that's going to help you finish the project or work towards the solution dealing with the situation you have. In fact, there's a quote that I like to use with this, which is, a lot of times when people have a problem, right? A lot of people do this. So when you have a problem, when you're drowning, it doesn't help you to spend all your time sitting there describing the water. And that's what people do. They're drowning, and all they do is describe the water. That's from a movie, As Good as It Gets. It's an old movie. Jack Nicholson, but a good movie though. So here's what I'm talking about. So people, they have something happen that they're upset about, and they're just like, the water's cold, it's deep, and a shark just touched my foot. Okay, that's not going to help you swim to shore. That's not going to help you get a life raft. That's not going to help you survive. At some point, now again, there's a value in venting. It's okay. Sometimes, like in that case, like a personal problem, like sometimes you do need to like feel the pain of the situation to teach you to not do it again, right? Or not put yourself in that position again. But at some point, once we move past the healthy venting and I just need to get it out, or I need to deal with the pain of something or the grief of something or whatever it may be, right? At some point, you got to stop describing the water. At some point, you got to start working on whether this is your fault, not your fault, whether you can change it or not, what's the best way to move forward, right? And you got to start to focus on something else. And disagreeing messages are when you need to focus on something else and you're just not doing it, right? You're staying there complaining, arguing about something instead of moving forward to solutions, right? Or if you can't change something, what's the best way to move forward, right? So keep that in mind. You can't just stay stuck, so to speak. All right, types of groups. Another big cultural thing is that in groups, workplace, and you even see this in other kind of like formally structured groups that people belong to, they tend to be centralized or decentralized. So centralized groups are where, and this is kind of the default that people kind of tend to like gravitate towards. So like a typical boss in a job who doesn't have a lot of training in like management or leadership will do this. So centralized groups is where the leader makes key decisions and they direct the flow of all the communication. So they walk in the room and they're like, all right, I'm the boss. I'm here. Big Chuck's here. Friends call me Big C. And we have a choice. We can do A or B. I think we should do A. It's super awesome. We're doing A. Go out there and do it, right? So basically, if you didn't even work there and you just walked into that room and you listened for 5 minutes, you would know who the boss is. You'd know who's calling the shots because Big C's over there telling everybody what to do, right? He's directing everything. That's how a lot of bosses do it, right? Like you might have already been in jobs like this where there's the weekly meeting and they're just like, here's what we're doing, right? And they're like, I got to take charge and be the leader, be the alpha, right? And that's kind of what they do. And other people may voice their opinion, but it's pretty clear who's running the show. Now, that's what we tend to gravitate towards. Decentralized groups there's obviously still a leader, right? Like the buck has to stop with someone and someone's got to make the final call. But the group participates in decision making as a whole, though. So like even though there has a leader who has final say, open communication is encouraged. So if you were sitting in that room and you didn't belong to the group and you're sitting there for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, you would you'd know who the leader is maybe, but you would feel like everybody's being listened to, everybody's being valued, and like open communication is encouraged. That's a decentralized group. So it's like, yeah, I'm the boss, but I'm going to give everybody a chance to talk about the pros and cons of something or talk about why they like or dislike what we're doing moving forward, right? That's a decentralized group. So those are the two types of groups. So one way to look at it is this visual would be if something's centralized, if you looked at it and you weren't a member of the group, you could clearly tell here's the leader and here's everybody else, right? All these different numbers or different jobs, different positions that have different values or worth or whatever, or different roles in this, but I know who the leader is. In a decentralized group, it's almost like everybody's being treated as co-leaders, right? Because everybody's opinion is being valued kind of almost equally. So they're all kind of looked at as ones, right? As the same, right? In terms of value. So you tend to have these two types play out. So what are the advantages of doing this like open, decentralized approach, which by the way tends to lead to a better culture? Why does that lead? So you want to encourage that. Why does it lead to a better culture? Is people feel more valued, right? They feel like they're listened to because they are listened to more than if some big C comes in and says, this is what we're doing, right? So it'll first advantage is it allows you to take advantage of the team's experience. And they're different, again, diverse perspectives, different backgrounds and resources. Now, again, if I'm the manager and I got 4 people who work with me and combined between them, they have 80 years of experience. If I never listen to what they have to say, not just in a PC way, like the suggestion box is over there, like truly listen to what they have to say, and maybe they could sway my opinion, like who knows, right? If I never do that, what's the point of having 80 years of experience? Right? if it's not being tapped into, I'm not using it anyway. They might as well have 8 years of experience. It doesn't matter, right? So it allows you to take advantage of that because you're actually listening to other people. It improves problem-solving skills. Again, we talked about this before. When you have a diverse group, they bring to it different perspectives, different solutions, different situations, and they're going to solve problems better, right? Because of that, they're going to have different resources, and you need that. You need that sort of like pool of ideas to draw from. An increased chance of innovation. So in other words, you're probably more likely to improve your product in a positive way moving forward. And look, everybody has to innovate. You can have a home run of a product, and it doesn't mean that you can just like rest on your or solution or whatever. You just stop and like, all right, I'm good, right? I'm going to spend the next 40 years of my life I don't have to do anything because I've invented the next greatest thing since sliced bread, right? You have to innovate, right? Think of something that we use every day. When the first iPhone came out, right? iPhone has the biggest market share. I have an iPhone. But if iPhone just stopped innovating at the iPhone 4 or whatever it may be, right? And Apple was like, we're good, right? Now, some of you may think, iPhones haven't actually changed that much since then. And you could maybe argue that. But they have innovated, right? Like the camera's different, the processor's different. Or take like laptops from 15 years ago. Really great product, useful, right? But if we just stopped, right? If Apple had just stopped at the iPhone 4 and they didn't innovate anymore, if they didn't keep improving, right? Then they would have been surpassed by Samsung completely, right? Because the modern, Galaxy or whatever Samsung has, right? Again, I'm an iPhone user, so I don't know. It's better than an iPhone 4, right? So they had to keep moving. You have to keep innovating. So you're more likely to come up with these like, what's the next new thing if you're listening to different people, right? Like a diverse group of people. So it increases your chance of innovation. And then again, obviously people feel valued. They're like, whether I'm the leader or not, I'm a valued part of this team. And therefore you're happier at work, right? So generally you actually want to be decentralized. If you have a choice between the two, you want to be decentralized. Now look, this doesn't always apply to every situation. Sometimes you have to be centralized where the leader is really directing things. Those could be like emergency situations where like you have to make a quick decision and it's extremely consequential. And so therefore, a lot of times that leader is a leader for a reason, right? They've got lots of experience in that situation. And so sometimes you do have to kind of make a call, and you can't just let's all have a team meeting here. But for the most part, if we're not dealing with like emergencies or really specific, situations, you generally want to be decentralized if you can, right? So, sometimes another good example of non-decentralized on purpose is like military situations, right? Where different members of the U.S. Armed Forces, they're not like when you make a decision, the general or the leader of that unit or group, they're making the decision, right? Like we're not just going to have a team meeting for 2 hours first. But again, that's because sometimes it's dealing with emergencies. That's because they're the general, they're the leader for a reason. They've got the experience, the training, and so you want them to be making that call. And so there's exceptions to the decentralized thing, but unless we're in those types of spots or an emergency with a company or just in life in general, for the most part, and even in emergencies, you can make some arguments. You still need to listen to everybody, but beyond these like rare exceptions, you do want to be decentralized if you can. So how do you create it? So there's lots of ways to create them, but this is just some for like future leaders out there, right? Some couple of quick tricks and tips here. So first of all, don't give your opinion first. If you want people to be honest with you, don't give your opinion first. Because think about it. If I walk in the room and I'm the boss, I say, all right, we could do A or B. I think we should do A, but I want to hear what everybody else has to say. What are you likely to say? You're more likely to say A now because you don't want to piss off the boss because I told you I want to do it, right? Or at least be less critical of A, right? Because I've already like played my hand. So don't show your cards. You know what you want to do. Why do you got to tell everybody just yet? If you want their honest feedback, don't just blurt it out, right? So that's a common, rookie mistake. Just stop. Don't give your opinion first. Let everybody talk. All right, we could do A or B. What do you guys think? There's some pros and cons to both. Let's talk about it. Or hey, if one of you got C, you got some other option, talk to me. Right? So, don't give your opinion right away. Second one, create an environment that's safe for dissent. And what I mean by that is if people give a critical opinion or they criticize a prior decision or something that's going on. Now, obviously, you don't want people criticizing each other in a way that's like attacking people. That you got to shut down. You can't let people criticize other people in a way that, like, now they're not going to want to talk because everybody's jumping down their throat, right? Kind of thing, right? So obviously you want to stop personal attacks. But what I'm talking about here is you want people to feel like it's okay to express opinions that might be critical, right, to a prior decision, particularly that you made if you're the leader, right? Or it's okay to critique other people as long as they're doing it in a respectful way. They're not attacking the person, right? Because again, if you want honest feedback and honest input from people, which you do, so you can make better decisions, right, from the group, they need, the only way to get honest opinions and honest feedback is if people can be honest in terms of their critiques and their criticism, right? It can't just be, I can be honest about happy stuff, about praising you and the good things you do, right? That you need to be also open and honest about the criticism. So let that make people feel like it's okay to disagree with you, as long as they, again, do it in a way that's not attacking people. Reflect on decisions. So what that means is take some time sometimes. So one of the other problems too is, like, you could come in the room and say, we could do A or B. What do you think we should do? And I want to hear what you guys have to say. And you go around the room for 10 minutes and half say A and half say B. And you're like, well, at the end, you're like, all right, great. Thanks for the opinion and input. I'm thinking A. I was thinking that coming in because I just think we're going to make a lot more money, or it's going to improve, profitability or make more money, or it's going to improve like quality or whatever it may be, right? So we're going to do A. So in other words, you can tell people, I value your opinion. I want to hear what you have to say. Okay. But if you make but after that, you're like, tell me what you think. I care what you have to say. But if you make like a really quick decision right away, sometimes people think you don't really care. Right? I mean, you said you valued their opinion. You said you want to hear what they had to say, but then you spend no time thinking about it afterwards. You were just like, and this is especially worse if you gave your opinion right away. So if you came in the room and said, let's talk about it. We can do A or B. I think we should do A. Right? And people give their opinion for 5 minutes and go, okay, that's great. I appreciate that, but we're doing A. Right? People feel like you didn't really listen to them. Right? You said you would, but you didn't really do it. So sometimes you need to just take some time. Say, okay, I'll think about what you guys have to say. We'll talk this afternoon, right? Or we'll talk tomorrow. Even if you've already made up your mind, or you've still made up your mind. Like, you went in the room, you thought we should do A, you didn't tell them, you heard all kinds of perspectives, and it did not change your mind. You may think they're the stupidest opinions, right, you'd ever heard, or the most, or most brilliant. They did change your mind. Sometimes you're better off just for show to wait and say, all right, I'll think about it, right? Let's say it didn't change your mind, right? Okay, I'll think about it. Then that afternoon, we'll meet again this afternoon. Then that afternoon you say, well, we're going to do it. Because it gives people the impression that because you thought about it, you value their opinion, right? And again, perception's reality. Even if it didn't change your mind and you didn't think it was that persuasive, you don't need to show that card, right? You're going to do A, it's your decision. You're going to make that decision. Why show that card that, like, they didn't change your mind? Because there's a chance that could make them, or that you didn't think about it that much. It wasn't even worth 5 minutes of your time to think about, right? You don't need to play that hand. Just walk away, tell them you're going to think about it, and then come back. And now, even though you're still doing what you originally wanted to do, A, if you didn't give your opinion first, they don't know that. And B, even if you did, it makes them feel like you valued them because at least you thought about it, right? So take some time sometimes. Now, you have to read the room, decide if that's needed or not, but it's just something to consider. Show your thinking. So what that means is when you make decisions, explain why. So we should do A, and here's what I'm thinking with that. Okay, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute as to why that matters. But explain to them why that is a good idea to do A, right? And then finally, ask people if they agree with it. Okay. Do they, even though you're still making the call, right? The decision's kind of done. What do you guys? How do you feel about this moving forward? Right? Can you live with this, so to speak? Is kind of what you're asking them, right? Like how committed are you going to be moving forward, knowing this is what we're doing, right? And then also follow up afterwards to see, okay, was this working for you? Okay, so was this just sort of seeing if the problem was still solved? This is sort of like, if you want to think of this in the interpersonal sense, it's sort of the value in, there's a problem, somebody talks to you about it, or you and are they and you say, well, this is what I'm going to do to try to fix that. Like, let's say it's a relationship. It's like, it's taking the step to follow up later to be like, so is this still a problem? Right? Like, how do you feel about how things are going? Right? Like, it's just following up afterwards. So those are all sort of important things to do. Okay, so in the final part of this video, we're actually going to come back to why the show your thinking, ask people, members, about if they agree with the decision and why follow-up matters. And we'll talk about some basic sort of leadership styles and interpersonal dynamics to wrap up. So I'll see you in that video.